And I don't think I would be me without you.
Hello and welcome everyone to Beethewellness podcast episode number 27. The Lamberts here, coming to you live from Venice Beach on a sultry Sunday evening. Sweltering Sunday evening.
Sultry, yeah. No, it might
hot.
be sultry where you are, but over here it's just really hot.
What is the word? Is it sweltering?
Sweltering,
right,
yeah.
Sweltering is the word I'm looking for. It's hot. We can't even think straight. But we're here nonetheless. And we are going to go over a couple things that kind of came up, some hot topics for the week, and give you a little bit of further explanation and instruction as to kind of what we've got going on strength and conditioning wise, and call it a night.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's
we're
a Sunday
cruising.
night. Hopefully everyone had a great weekend. We had an awesome weekend glamping in Joshua Tree.
Glamping, yes.
If you haven't heard of glamping, you should Google it. And it's pretty cool. It's basically a tent that's already set up with an awesome
With a bed.
feather bed. and basically it's like a hotel room, but you're outside.
Yeah, it's just
In the
with a
wilderness.
zipper. It's a hotel room with a zipper.
Yes. Yeah, and it's actually really fun. So we had an awesome weekend glamping in Joshua Tree at our good friend's wedding. And if you guys haven't done that, I would suggest it. It was really cool.
Yeah, and Joshua Tree was cool.
Yes, very beautiful area.
Super fun.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, somebody asked about the Bulletproof Exec's protein fasting protocol, which is something that apparently they've been talking about recently. And I had to do a little bit of Google food to try to sort out exactly what is going on. The protein fast thing has been around, I don't know, since I think the first time I saw it pop up was like in 2007 or 8. And kind of in the paleo endurance sphere. Mm-hmm. And more or less, the idea is that it induces autophagy or autophagy, however, I'm not really sure how exactly you say it, but I'm pretty sure it's autophagy, which is, it's essentially just, it's internal house cleaning, right? But it's also something that it just happens. It's part of our body's natural process. It is a thing that happens. And there's some thought that that specifically protein fasting increases the rate of this, internal house cleaning. I wasn't actually able to find any scientific papers, no studies, no literature that actually pointed to a difference between protein only fasting versus, say, just intermittent fasting or caloric restriction, or just intense exercise. And so I'm a little skeptical as to whether or not there's any point in really doing a protein only fast to specifically for, increasing autophagy. But it can't hurt, I guess. It's like, just kind of like we talk about ketosis, right? You can spend some time in ketosis and it's probably beneficial long term. I think there's probably not any reason not to throw in either a protein fast or just a fast in general, right?
Yes.
Every now and then.
Well, one thing I just want to interject, though, is a lot of times when people start down this paleo road or this wellness road, they will sort of want to go into hyperdrive with things, and they'll want to do, okay, if I'm paleo, then being ketogenic is even better because I can expedite fat loss. I can do all these things even faster. And I think this is one of the things we fall into when we get into this zone of trying to improve our results. We start looking for the silver bullet or, in this case, the bulletproof.
The bulletproof bullet.
Wait, whatever it is. But, I think one of the most important things for folks out there is just get stable first. Get your body to a place where that if you actually do interject an intermittent fast or a protein fast, you don't need to ask us if it's working for you because you actually are to a place where you can monitor the results of these different experiments. So that's one thing that I think happens a lot with clients. We see this all the time is they're super excited. They love the ethos behind this whole thing and they want to go faster, harder, stronger into this lifestyle. And I think one of the things that's really important is just get stable. Try getting yourself to a place where if you introduce something, you can monitor yourself. You can see you can see how things are affecting you, and you don't actually have to ask for external backup or advice on whether it's working for you, because you'll know.
Totally. Well, and you will have some idea of like what worked, right?
Right.
So if you're still kind of tinkering with a ton of different things, and you throw in a protein fast, and you start taking creatine, and you introduce, bi-weekly, I don't know, colonics or something like that. Like, how are you going to know what is actually making any sort of difference? Right,
exactly. So try to stabilize. Try to get to a place where you have a solid base. Maybe if you do an intermittent fast once a week, then maybe change that to a protein fast once, for a couple weeks and see how that changes. But maybe just like you said, don't just throw everything on the fire and then go, is this working? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, totally. And it's a hack, and that is one thing that I will give the Bulletproof exec guys on this, is that they are saying, no, this is a hack to jumpstart, fat loss and all this kind of stuff,
right.
which, and maybe it works, maybe that is the case, but there's going to be something like this all the time. And I guess the point is you can jump on the bandwagon with trying new stuff all the time and doing that, if that is something you like to do. If you're a biohacker and a tweaker,
of course,
with that kind of stuff, and you want to do it, then by all means. But certainly don't feel like this is something that you need to do, or that you're, otherwise missing out on this cellular house cleaning.
Right. And don't do it at all costs, because, if you have some adrenal issues going on, it may not be the most important time for you to be fasting, for you to be worrying about caloric restriction and doing all of these things. So, and this is unfortunately a lot of times folks do have weight gain. They do have all of these things because the adrenals are fatigued, and because they're not able to, they don't have a healthy system. They're not already intact. So the problem with going in, guns blazing, is that you may be exacerbating an underlying issue that already exists. So, just all of this is good information. And like Adam said, it's biohacking. And if you want to tinker with it, great. But just make sure you're going into it from a stable place where you know that your health and especially your adrenals are intact for this kind of specific hacking. Absolutely.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, a lot of the things we're already doing work really well at inducing this natural internal process that is happening anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. We're on the long train of getting week by week, month by month, you getting to a place where all of these things are happening. Yeah, we're not like the super uber biohackers, because our goal is long term. And I think the problem with some of this stuff is that they are short and they're intense, and sometimes they're just hard to stick with, and you can't tell. And especially the intermittent fasting thing, I think that you'll get into a thought pattern where it's intermittent fasting at all costs, and you may feel like crap. You may be tired. Your stomach's growling. You have a headache, but you read this paper that intermittent fasting is good for cell reparation, and it's just take a look at the end game, the long game.
Yeah, totally. Tinker, play around.
Yes.
Or don't.
Or don't. Or just keep doing what we tell you.
Just keep doing it. Yeah, or what anybody tells you.
Yeah.
But just, it's not necessary, but then again, it's not going to kill you if you want to give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So if that wasn't all sides of the argument.
Let me reiterate. So we're absolutely clear. Your body's going to do it anyway, provided that you are eating well, exercising in a reasonable manner, and especially if you spend some time in ketosis or intermittent fasting.
Right. I know. It's so funny. It's hard to really take a firm stance on these things, because we're thinking of every single one of you that we've dealt with or that we've talked with about different issues. And I'm like, well, this person, this is maybe not a
Sally,
great idea.
23 from Rhode Island, don't do this.
Exactly. Exactly. So hopefully you guys are able to connect with, the scenario that fits you and go, okay, that sounds like me, and I'm yes or I'm no. I'm yes go or no go.
Or don't go. And so more on the wishy-washy stuff.
Yes.
Next thing we want to talk about is Denise Minger's blog post that she just did on, I think it was titled "In Defense of Low Fat." And it actually didn't really stir up quite as much buzz as I thought it was going to. Like, the blogosphere is relatively silent. And I think part of it is because it's just, well, I don't know. We'll just launch into it. We'll just go into the whole thing. So my perspective on this whole thing is that she did a really good job of reviewing a lot of lesser known literature, right? Going back and stuff, because a lot of this I had no idea. Some of these low fat studies from the 20s and 30s, I was, very much under the impression that Ansel Keys was the beginning of all of that, and so that's interesting information, right? It's cool, a very thorough review. She went through it and took a pretty good look at all of that stuff. So a few things to note about the literature itself. This was, 80, 90 years ago, and it was self-reported data, right, for the most part. So the studies themselves wouldn't really pass muster today, right? So not to discount them completely, but it's something we have to think about. Like, how were these studies put together? How well were these things controlled? What other sort of lifestyle factors are going on, right? So in 1930, it was a very different life, right? So now we have way more external stressors and changes. I mean, think about the photo period. Well, our artificial light, our just general stress levels, the computers, all of these things that we interact with make for a very different environment today than in the 20s and 30s,
right, for
sure. And there's no way to unconfound that, right? Like, so comparing something from then to now is, it's only marginally useful.
Right.
Where I think it is super useful, though, is that it does a pretty good job of just sort of showing us where our biases have started to sneak in, right? And like how maybe indoctrinated or ingrained we've gotten into a particular way of thinking. And so these interventions, and I guess that's probably pretty important to sort of reiterate here, is that these diets, these studies were interventions to treat a disease. So these weren't, maintenance diets in a healthy population. These were diseased people being fed an intervention diet, right?
Right.
So that in itself means it probably doesn't apply to most of you, right? Unless you happen to be, type 1 diabetic, because that's what a lot of these folks were, type 1 and type 2 diabetic, right? So just for some context, it's a very different thing that was going on there. Another thing that I think, and she did talk about this, but I don't feel like for the nature of the article, I don't think that she kind of went into it in depth enough, but was the reintroduction of normal food after the intervention phase, right? So you have these people on this basically sugar, water, and starch diet for a period of time until things correct, and then they start reintroducing protein and fat back into the diet, and now all of a sudden it looks like a, macronutrient sort of neutral whole food diet. Right. So, yeah. Anyway, the bottom line is there's a lot that was going on here, but I think, and I don't think there's anything in there that would change the way that I recommend diets or the way that I should do my own diet. There's nothing in there that's really stimulating any significant change. But what it did do for me was really highlight my biases and the things that sort of fire me up when I read this kind of material. And I think that is totally worth sort of looking at, right? So I'm reading through this, and she comes to the part where she's talking about the components of the vegan diet that Dr. Esselstyn uses or has used. So some of these studies were cherry picked for the China study, the book, The China Study, not the actual China study, and Forks Over Knives. And then subsequently his son, Rip Esselstyn, his vegan firefighter diet book, the Engine 2 diet, right? And so a lot of this stuff has just kind of been filtering around in my life for a while. And so when I read about this stuff and talking about the components of it that she is sort of saying that the literature supports, it just spins me out. Like I just got angry reading it. I'm like, what is this, blasphemy that I'm hearing here? Like clearly this isn't something that is true. And, what's she trying to push, some sort of weird, agenda or whatever, and so it's like this weird conspiracy theorist spin up that happens in my brain, and that's a problem, for somebody who is supposed to be critically thinking about how to best construct and best sort of direct people in this path, like that's something that I kind of need to address. Right?
Well, actually, I think it's a problem for any movement as a whole, because I think, everyone has the paleo friend or has experienced in themselves when they start down a road and then anything else is blasphemous. And this is, like Adam's saying, this is highlighting once again that, there isn't actually one specific path that is the right path. But what we really need to do is recognize that the pendulum has swung all the way over to bacon makes everything better for a lot of people. And that's not necessarily the healthiest way of looking at things either. And so, it's always important to have a counterbalance to what's going on in the movement. And I think that was what was really cool about this article, is that it did bring in it brought the conversation back that, hey, okay, well, maybe it's not just high fat, low carb, and we have already been talking about that anyway. This subject has already been floating around, but this was, a little bit more constructive criticism of the whole thing with some support from some studies. But
totally. Well, and one of the things too is that and it's very interesting. I think this is probably part of it that I think is maybe like the most useful point, is this concept of, and actually Cindy K threw this out there, that you got to pick a team.
What up, Cindy?
What up, Cindy? Holla. So she says you got to pick a team, right? And when we're talking about picking a team, it's you're either high fat or you're low carb. And if you're in the middle, you could potentially be setting yourself up for slowed success or some sort of derangement, right? And one of the things that Minger talks about in here, which is pretty clear, is that it's kind of like this 10% rule. So you're getting 10% of your calories from carbohydrates, you're good to go. If you're getting 10% of your calories from fat, you're good to go. If you're somewhere in that middle, she calls it the macronutrient swampland, then the outcomes are less clear, right?
Right.
And, we certainly have plenty of, communities or whatever, like the Okinawans, for example, are a perfect example. The Kitavans or Kitavans, or however you say that word, another good example of people who are very low fat. And I've certainly seen success with myself and then also with some other clients in kind of following this Okinawan kind of diet. Like, not all the time, but certainly as a weight cutting measure, right? It's this sort of 10 to 12% of your calories from fat, and then, the sort of normal 1 gram per pound of lean mass for protein, and then the rest from carbohydrate. And I've seen that work for sure, just like we've seen, super low carb ketogenic diets be corrective for people, right? So all of this stuff works. And I think there's something that's important to keep an eyeball on, is that swampland. That's the place that we want to watch out for. And it's something that we talk about like regularly, is that, especially with carb cycling and stuff, right? Where we say you're either going to be high fat or you're going to be high carb, but you're not going to be sort of both in the same meal, in the same day, potentially in the same cycle, right?
Right. And I think this is why I tend to really focus, the further I go in this, on my journey, I tend to focus more on nutrient density. And it's really about the nutrient scape for me. And obviously, where can we nourish ourselves and how can we nourish ourselves the best? Because if you look at nourishment first, you're pretty much going to fall into, from my point of view, you're going to fall into probably a lower carb, moderate protein, and a lot of veggies. You're going to really be looking at getting a lot of your density from vegetable matter and that's important. I think that there was an argument for a while where it was like, okay, you don't even need the vegetables, just eat the steak and you're good to go.
Yeah, the cow eat the vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that doesn't work for me. That never sounded right to me. Yeah. It's a great argument, and I can understand like how someone could pitch that and even scientifically how you could sell that, but it just doesn't make sense for me. We need to be looking at where we're getting our nutrients, how we can introduce a variety of nutrients. And that's why we've been talking about the seasonality of food so much here, and trying to remember, okay, look, there's Brussels sprouts back in the market now. What kind of nutrients are we getting? It's about really engaging with the nutrient scape that's out there and constantly trying to improve that.
The nutrientscape.
Yeah, I made that
like
word
it.
up.
Yeah, you just nailed it. That could be like an entire form of photography.
Yes.
I'm a landscape photographer. I'm a nutriscape photographer.
Nutrient. Nutrientscape.
Nutrientscape?
Yes,
Right,
I'm going to
right.
start hashtagging that.
Hashtag nutrientscape.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, bottom line, it'll be interesting to see what part 2 holds, especially with regard to like the cholesterol component of it. She sort of hinted around at some new idea about how carbohydrates may or may not affect blood lipids, and I'm really kind of waiting to see what she has to say about that.
And one other
It's pretty
thing,
important.
to really consider is the kind of carbohydrate that we're getting now compared to 1920. The kind of bread, the kind of processed food. There's so many different ingredients and genetically modified foods. Like none of this existed before. When you were eating bread, most likely you made it that morning, and you went to the store and bought the flour and actually kneaded the dough and baked the bread yourself. We're dealing with such a different actual system of food now.
Yeah,
so
totally.
we can't forget that part of it too. That's a huge component of it. And whether people believe in being gluten-free or believe in low carb or whatever, the one thing I think most of us can agree on is that our food system is not what it used to be. We are not getting the nutrients that we used to get from breads and those
From
kinds.
everything.
Yeah, from everything, really. Yeah.
And in the vegetables and everything. Yeah, and that is really a good point. And I don't know. I could go on about the, like. There's no way I would ever recommend a diet of white bread and white sugar. Like, period. Even there's still a better way to do it. Like,
Right.
Why wouldn't you feed somebody sweet potatoes and bananas? You know what I mean? You can still get the same amount of carbohydrate, the same amount. Like, there's
But you
better
get more
ways to do it.
nutrients,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like it's just some of that stuff's bizarre. But I will say it is shocking to me that they were able to correct insulin sensitivity with some of this stuff. So I don't know.
And here's the
It's
thing.
super
Once again, mind over matter. If your doctor tells you, hey, you're going to eat this and it's going to fix you. Obviously,
there's that.
obviously they were reported studies, right? So they weren't
Right.
double-blind,
No,
placebo.
no.
These were
control that.
Yeah. So, essentially, if someone tells you that something's going to make you better, especially in the 1920s when your doctor was like a god. Back then, people really respected their doctors, and that they were the be all end all for your health advice.
Yeah, no, that's true.
It makes a huge difference. Your mind and what you believe is going to have effect on you.
Yeah.
Most likely will.
Yeah, the fact that there is such a thing as a placebo effect means that you just can't discount it.
Right. Yeah.
So it's super interesting. But again, don't throw any babies or bathwater out.
Yes.
If what you're doing is working, continue to do it.
Yes.
And if what you're doing is not working, then let's continue to figure out what's up. And let's find a spot.
Nutrientscape.
Hashtag Nutrientscape. Bottom line.
Yes. Well, it is really cool, though, and I like this because I think we did need that pendulum to swing all the way back towards a higher fat, sort of like re-embrace fat. That needed to happen.
Right.
There's a lot of nutrients within fat, and it's really good for our bodies. But now we're finding a nice level and a nice balance for everything. So to be continued.
Yeah. Totally.
So one other thing we wanted to talk about this week was just kind of have an overview again of the goals for the season and sort of what we're looking at this season. Some of you are not using weight, or you have injuries that preclude you from adding any resistance to the workouts. And, obviously we've made mention that the focus of this season is to kind of start lifting and adding a little bit more extra weight to things. So we just wanted to, address those of you out there who aren't doing that, who have injuries or who, whatever's going on, or you have adrenal issues and, you're taking it really easy on the workouts. And we just wanted to make sure that yes, indeed, follow that plan. There's so much to get out of this program without worrying about how much you're squatting every week.
Totally.
And so don't let us, derail you from what you already know is your truth, which is health first and getting back to a nice, easy base.
Yeah.
So one thing that you might want to consider is doing some of the core activation work. Even if you're not doing the workouts, if you're just doing moderate walks or whatever you're doing, think about doing some of the core activation, because when you do start adding in some of the weightlifting or some of the resistance training, you'll have that nice
That
core
base.
stability.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll get all of those neural paths and everything firing so that you'll have a really solid base and everything will be connected. So, consider adding that in, even if you're not doing anything else.
Totally. No, I think that's a great idea. And it's, as people are finding out, it's challenging.
It's very challenging.
It's not the easiest stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's almost
Yeah.
like, I don't know if it's mentally or physically challenging.
It's both.
It's right in the middle
Yeah.
of this very complex equation where you're like, I can't tell if I can't focus hard enough
Right.
to do this, or if it's just
Is this
really
a thinking
hard.
problem, or
Yes.
am I just weak? Like, I don't know.
Exactly.
And for me, it's a combination. Like, it's definitely a combination. Like, because when I get everything locked in, it's easy,
Yes.
right? When everything's activated appropriately, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. You're achieving super stiffness, as Stuart McGill would say. Then it's easy.
Right.
But then a fly buzzes across your nose and you collapse.
Right.
And then you can't get it back.
Well,
So
and we're
it's
so
tricky.
used to just bearing down. Everything is like, okay, we just squeeze harder, squeeze harder, push harder, do whatever. You want to give a bigger effort to make something happen, and that's not the solution for this kind of work. So it is very interesting to connect all the dots from a physical standpoint and a mental standpoint. And, one other thing I wanted to mention as well is anyone out there that has back issues, probably skip the Supermans.
low back issues.
Low back
Yeah.
Yes, low back issues. Probably skip the Supermans and the heel kicks.
Yeah.
If you feel like you can get through them and it's not bothering you at all, that's fine. But just, word of warning for those of you who know you've got a chronic lower back thing going on, go ahead and skip those. If you want, you can swap them out with something like bird dogs,
Yeah.
where you alternate extending one arm and one leg from your hands
All
and knees.
foursies.
Yeah. And we've done those, kind of like what you do for the handstand work, where you extend one hand and one leg out on each side, swap back and forth.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that was
that's
one-
that's a good idea. And because even though in the Supermans and in the heel kicks, the extension that we're really looking for is coming from your glutes and your shoulder structure, you know.
Yes.
But when you're maybe not firing in 100% in those places, what ends up happening is you extend or hyperextend your spine,
Your low back,
your spinal erectors just get fired up, and that is not necessarily what you're looking for. If you
Right.
have any sort of disc, issues. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and this is just like the front ab activation, the core activation on the front body. The same thing exists for the back, where it's like, wait, am I lifting from my lower back? Am I squeezing my glutes? I can't really tell. So, if you've got anything in there that you're afraid of exacerbating an injury, then just take it easy. Maybe try one set if you're on the fence and see how you feel. You can always add as time goes on.
Totally.
Add one set each week, and we just
Yeah.
want you to be careful with those backs. It's very easy, especially in these movements, to tweak something.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. And it's all about endurance in these muscles.
Yes.
Right. So like this is you need endurance in these muscles, not necessarily 1 rep max strength in these muscles.
Exactly.
Right? So they're there to stabilize and translate power.
Right.
And they need to be able to do that consistently. So these short bursts of flex, relax, flex, relax, flex, relax, 10 seconds on, 5 seconds off, 10 seconds on, 5 seconds off is a really good way to make that kind of stuff happen.
Right. And
So
the same
we'll keep
thing
cranking
goes,
through that.
yeah, same thing goes for your front abs. If you are, translating it and all of a sudden your hip flexors are just fired up and you cannot maintain that core activation, just stop. Literally, even if it takes you doing one at a time, as soon as that starts translating into a different place, you've lost the connection and it's no longer what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. Now you're compensating.
Yeah,
Right.
you're just using the muscles you already had, the connections you already had, to do what you're already able to do. So,
It's cool. You're doing the work.
which is awesome. You can do that.
What we're really trying to do is get something else going on.
Yeah, exactly. So anyhow, that is this week's show. You guys are doing great. We're headed into week 2. Lots of good energy this month. I feel like everyone is really fired up.
Ready for fall
Yep.
or summer, depending
Yeah.
on where you are.
Yeah, fall or summer. But you're fired up one way or another.
Fired up. Yep. And it's all good stuff.
Yes, awesome. So we will be back with you guys next week. And if any folks are in the LA area, we've got my album release party coming up this Friday night at Full Circle in Venice. So feel free to come join us. It starts at 7, and we're gonna party.
We're gonna do it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be super cool. All right, folks. We will speak at you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.